Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating, the giant gap between acting rich and actually being wealthy. We live in a world that is just totally obsessed with status, right? But real wealth is about what you build, not what you show off. So we're going to break down the exact patterns people use when they're pretending to be rich so you can recognize them, avoid them, and most importantly, protect your own financial future. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth do people buy bags that cost literally more than their entire bank account balance? It's a crazy image, isn't it? Walking around with this massive status symbol on your arm while your actual savings are practically zero. This provocative question really highlights a trap so many fall into, sabotaging their true financial lives just to look wealthy to complete strangers. Okay, let's dive into this and look at exactly how this happens. So here's our roadmap for spotting these financial red flags. We'll look at the material traps, the financial realities, insecurity and money talk, digital facades and schemes, and finally, why real wealth whispers. All right, starting us off with Section 1, the material traps. Pretending to be rich almost always starts with stretching the budget. Someone who desperately wants to look wealthy but doesn't quite have the cash will usually grab the absolute cheapest, flashiest designer thing they can find, like a giant logo belt. Or they'll buy the absolute base model luxury car. They just want that BMW or Mercedes badge, right? Even though a fully loaded Toyota would be way more comfortable for the exact same price. And oh man, the counterfeits. Buying a fake bag with crooked stitching, literally just for the logo, that proves it's not about quality or craftsmanship at all. It's literally just buying a fake version of status. And what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast in how these two groups actually spend their money. The fake rich might blow a massive 20 to 30% of their income desperately trying to look the part. They kind of hope that if they buy the status symbol first, the actual wealth will just magically follow. Spoiler alert, it rarely does. On the flip side, people with actual wealth, they spend maybe 2 to 5% on the flashy stuff, and they usually only buy those things after they've become financially successful and established. Now look at this year-by-year breakdown. This perfectly illustrates a massive material trap, leasing a luxury car. So many people think, hey, I can afford the monthly payment, so I can afford the car, right? Well, no. When you lease, the dealership is absolutely winning. Think about it. In year one, you are essentially financing the absolute steepest part of that car's depreciation curve, plus interest and fees, of course. And then, after 3 years of paying for the most expensive part of that vehicle's life, you just hand the keys back. You own absolutely nothing. It is, hands down, one of the most expensive ways to drive a car. Which brings us to Section 2, the financial realities. If you can't afford it twice, don't buy it. I love this. It's such a fantastic, punchy rule of thumb to live by. I mean, imagine walking around carrying a $5,000 Gucci bag, but you only have $2,000 sitting in your emergency fund. That's not a flex. That is a terrifying financial position to be in. If a designer item costs 2 or 3 entire months of your income, and you couldn't comfortably buy it twice without breaking a sweat, you simply aren't rich yet. Let's actually run the numbers on a standard budget to see how this plays out. Here's the super popular 50-30-20 rule. That's 50% for needs, 20% for savings, and a maximum of 30% for discretionary fun spending. So let's say you're making a fantastic income, $10,000 a month. That 30% gives you a $3,000 discretionary slice. But here is the kicker. A single $3,000 designer item completely cannibalizes your entire fun budget for the whole month. When you actually do the math, that facade of being wealthy falls apart incredibly fast. Moving right along to Section 3, insecurity and money talk. Here's the thing about people who are actually secure in their wealth. They don't need to constantly remind you about it. But the ones projecting an image, oh, they are dropping their income into totally unrelated conversations all the time. You could literally be chatting about pizza toppings, like, oh, I love black olives, and completely unprompted, they'll go, yeah, I used to eat those when I was broke, but now that I make so much money, I don't eat them anymore. I mean, it's just absurd. And then you have the constant one-upper. You show off a watch you're super proud of, and bam, they immediately have to mention their Rolex Submariner just to feel superior. Or worse, you get the condescending critic, who randomly shames you for not upgrading your apartment yet, just to validate their own wildly inflated spending. Another huge behavioral red flag is manipulating the numbers when they talk. Here's a perfect example we see a lot in spaces like the dropshipping industry. Someone will get on social media and loudly brag, I made $500,000 this year. But they are intentionally confusing their massive top-line revenue with their actual take-home profit. If you look at the drop-off on the right, an actual net profit margin might be closer to just 10%. So sure, they brag about making $500,000, but they're really only netting 50 grand. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still decent money, but it is a profoundly different reality than the one they're trying to project. Have you ever noticed how some people are always talking about deals that are about to close? Or how rich they're going to be once some magical investment pays off? We call this operating in the future tense, and it happens because their present, everyday reality just doesn't match the grand image they want you to see. But hey, money isn't real until it actually hits your bank account, right? So bragging about future windfalls is a massive warning sign that you're looking at a financial facade. All right, let's get into section 4, digital facades and schemes. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute trap of social media. Look, social media isn't real life. It's a highly contrived highlight reel. A flashy post showing off a $1,000 mall shopping spree, probably pumped up by fake bot followers in the comments, is purely designed to get views and project status. But meanwhile, the boring reality, the unglamorous everyday discipline of quietly saving $1,000 into an emergency fund, yeah, that rarely gets likes or clicks. But make no mistake, that quiet discipline is what actually builds real wealth. Because true wealth building is incredibly slow. And let's be honest, kind of boring. The fake rich are always hunting for shortcuts. Enter the get-rich-slightly-fast scheme. Now, I'm not talking about your obvious email scams here. I'm talking about highly improbable financial shortcuts. Things like super aggressive crypto day trading, Forex, or certain multi-level marketing setups that are sold on the promise of drastically changing your life in just 1 year. They exist simply to bypass the decades of slow, steady discipline that real wealth actually demands. And that builds right into this devastating reality. 99%. That is the stark, sobering number of people who will jump into these heavily promoted, slightly fast schemes and ultimately fail and lose all their money. Real wealth almost never comes from magically turning $5,000 into $1 million in a single calendar year. It just doesn't work like that. Finally, we arrive at section 5, real wealth whispers. You know, when someone is just pretending, they have this tendency to absolutely overdo everything. They're plastered head to toe in brand logos. They completely overdo their accessories. They smell like they literally bathed in the perfume department. And they act out these weird, arrogant stereotypes that they saw wealthy characters play in the movies. When every single thing you own is desperately designed to broadcast a brand name to the person standing next to you, it really doesn't demonstrate a high net worth. It demonstrates pure, unadulterated insecurity. In fact, the wealthiest people often dress super modestly because they don't need to be walking billboards. Which brings us to our final and maybe most important thought today. Real wealth whispers. It simply doesn't need to scream. True wealth is having the ultimate confidence to live comfortably, totally free from the exhausting pressure of trying to impress strangers. So the next time you feel that itch to buy some flashy new status symbol, ask yourself, are you actually building a foundation for your financial independence, or are you just funding the illusion of it? What else are you sacrificing just for the sake of an audience? Keep building quietly, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.